and welcome to the first U.S. Trans Caucus Zoom meeting. I am just so thrilled to be a part of this conversation and dialogue, and really to just share airspace with all of you, and certainly with my colleagues that are serving on the state legislatures around the country. And with us today is State Representative Brianna Titone, Delegate Danica Roem from Virginia, Representative Lisa Bunker, and Representative Gerri Cannon. And as was mentioned, my co-facilitator today is Minneapolis City Council member Philippe Cunningham, who is out doing his job, welcoming new businesses into his ward. It really is something to see in the midst of this pandemic, that we still have brave and determined business owners opening businesses in the midst of this pandemic. And, you know, I do want to take a moment to just acknowledge all of the people in the United States that have died from this disease thus far. It has, and just send my condolences to their families. It has been deeply tragic and just deeply concerning that so many people have lost their lives, and 14.7 million people have lost their jobs and their income and employment. And I think all of us, as we are sitting at home, and you know, some of us are very fortunate to be working from home. Many of us are not. But I do think that we're all grieving the loss of being able to see and be with and hug our family and friends. Some of us are unable to grieve the deaths of our family members from this virus. Like I said, many of us, you know, have lost income, or certainly the opportunities that, you know, were present to us prior to March. I would just say mid-March. You know, it's just been, I journal every day, and I was just reflecting this morning how weird it is. It's been almost 8 weeks now that I've been sitting at home and doing Zoom meetings with the city council, and with all of my constituents, and having virtual town hall meetings and all of these kinds of things. And it's just so weird. But I'm really proud to say that, you know, we have been able to, here in Minneapolis, on the Minneapolis City Council, shift all of our workforce to a virtual reality, as it were. We've been able to have public hearings. We've been having all of our city council meetings. We actually changed our city council structure because the mayor called an emergency declaration, which gives, and we voted to support it, but it gives the mayor pretty much full authority to run the city. And so because we're all working from home, it's very expensive to do those virtual meetings. So we've consolidated our committee structures, and now we're down to just 2 committees that is doing all of the work of the full council. So we have, at least I know I have, very long 7-8 hour Zoom days. And I suspect all of my colleagues do as well. So just wanted to just acknowledge the times that we're living in, but also to say I'm really proud to be a part of the United States Trans Caucus. Many of you know that I am a poet, and so I thought I would open up this whole conversation with a little art, a little poetry for the times that we are living in. And it's the piece, it's very short, but it's called #Together Apart. And it starts with an epigraph by Gwendolyn Brooks. We are each other's business. We are each other's harvest. We are each other's magnitude and bond. Life changes, surprises you, bites you in the ass. The kids go to school from home now. If you're lucky, you work at home now. The air is fresher than it has been in a very long time now. Human connections keeps us alive, but social distance does too. We hope. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. So, I think how we're gonna approach this is I will introduce our 4 panelists and then allow them to give them each 5 minutes to sort of introduce themselves, talk a little bit about their platforms and the work that they have been doing in their respective legislative bodies. And then we will move to the questions that have been submitted by our participants. We have a number of participants on the call from all over the country. And we've taken those questions and compiled them. And we want to make sure that we answer those, as well as try to get to Q&A questions that come in as we are talking. So with us today, again, we have Representative Brianna Titone, Representative Danica Roem, Lisa Bunker, and Representative Gerri Cannon. And why don't we go ahead and start with Representative Brianna Titone. You have 5 minutes. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you are working on and what you're up to these days.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Andrea, for being here, and all the other panelists. Grateful for you all and all the work you're doing. My name is Brianna Titone. I'm the state representative in House District 27 in Colorado, and that's a suburb of Denver just to the west, just before you get to the mountains. Pretty suburban town, lots of homes and not as many businesses, a handful of breweries. We're starting to get up there. But it's a great town, and I'm happy to be representing the people here in Colorado. I was elected in 2018. That was the first election I was running in. I was thought that it would never happen, that I would never get elected, and so my opponent didn't really try very hard to win because they didn't think they had to. They still came pretty close. I ended up winning my election by 439 votes out of close to 50,000 votes. So we had approximately 75 to 76% turnout. So everybody voted just about in the district, and I had to make sure that they all voted for me. So the strategy we took was to knock on people's doors, and we did. We knocked on about 50,000 of them, some of them over and over again, to make sure that we were getting the message out, making sure people knew who I was. And a little bit about myself. I'm a geochemist and a software developer. I've got more degrees than a thermometer, some people say. I got 2 master's degrees, 2 bachelor's degrees. Degrees don't really matter in this job, but having the knowledge that comes with those degrees definitely helps understand a lot of these issues, which are very complex. I'm one of the very few scientists in the state legislature. That was something that people really appreciated when I was running for office, that I was bringing real scientific value to the legislature. And I've been a volunteer in my community my whole life. I'm from New York originally, from upstate New York. I know a couple of my friends are on the call here, Eve and her wife, and that we went to undergrad together at New Paltz. And when I was in New York, I was a volunteer firefighter. So I started out volunteering in my community when I was 16, and learned the value of community and what it's like to have service for your community. And that really carried with me through my whole life. And I've always found different volunteer opportunities along the way for me to do. So finishing up being a board member of my HOA, I was the president of my HOA, and a lot of people say that that's even worse than being a legislator in terms of getting grief from people. And it's true sometimes. And running HOA bills, that's no better. That's the I'm the envy of no one. It's just been really good to be out working for the community, because what I wanted to do originally was become an FBI special agent. And that's where I put a lot of my time into trying to get that job. And ultimately, that didn't turn out for me. And I wanted to find something different to do. And it was also when I got to a point where I said, well, if there's a job that I'm sacrificing who I really am inside to be, then I'm going to actually take the time to look at myself. So that's when I decided that I was going to figure myself out. And that's when I came out as being trans. Started to become more of an activist because I realized that being trans really took away a lot of my privilege that I didn't realize I had. So once I realized that, I was an activist in the LGBT community, trying to fight for different bills that were important for the LGBT community, and led down the path of politics. And since I've been in politics, I'm on the Joint Technology Committee. I'm on the Rural Affairs and Agriculture Committee and the Health and Insurance Committee. So I serve a lot of different roles there. And one of the things that I do a lot on the side is helping a lot of trans people with insurance issues. And a lot of trans people get denied insurance coverage just because the insurance company doesn't want to pay it. And they're really just burying you in bureaucracy and telling you, no. And that's where I come in. People ask me to help them, and I have access to the insurance commissioner. I have access to people who can really start pushing these companies around who are denying people service. So these are some of the things that I've been doing, visiting a lot of GSAs and talking to kids in schools is something that I really like to do. And if there's a school out there in the Denver metro area, please let me know. I'm happy to come down once things get back to whatever normal we get to, and happy to do that. Or we'll do it virtually. We'll do it this way too. I'm happy to do that. But it's just an honor to be serving in the Colorado House. We're working on doing remote testimony and remote participation to get us back to finish our budget and all of our bills. And that's something that I'm heading up right now. We've been doing lots of tests and going through fake bills and procedures just to kind of work the kinks out. So on top of all the work that I do for the legislature and my constituents, I have another job as a software developer. Lately, that's like a 30-hour-a-week job on top of all that. So I keep busy on weekends and nights and mornings and everything, and I love it because doing the work of the people is the most rewarding thing that I've ever found to do. But I will not take any more time. I will pass the baton to Delegate Danica Roem, who most of you are here for her anyway, because she's the rock star. She's the one that did it first, and we all followed because of her breaking that barrier at the state level. So Andrea, do you want to chime in first? You have to be unmuted first.
Am I unmuted now?
Yeah.
Great. I did want to just jump in, Brianna. Thank you so much for doing your introduction. And Delegate Roem, if you don't mind, Councilmember Cunningham joined us right as Brianna began. And I'm just hoping we can give him 5 minutes to introduce himself, or up to 5 minutes. You don't have to take the whole time, but to introduce yourself. Tell us what you're up to on the council. Maybe tell us a little bit about the ribbon cutting you just did, and let the audience know who you are. Thank you, Delegate Roem.
All right, I couldn't unmute myself. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Philippe Cunningham, and I am the Minneapolis City Council member representing the 4th Ward, which is in North Minneapolis. I'm proud to represent one of the most diverse parts of our entire city, and I really love the work that we do. Along with Council Vice President Jenkins, I was elected in 2017 and have been a proud council member and policy wonk since being elected. Right now, as we are in quarantine, it's been a really unique opportunity to be able to really deeply dive into equity work in particular, because racial equity and disparities are really starting to reveal themselves during this time. So now is a really keen opportunity to be able to dive in deep, to be able to pull that work apart and see where there's an opportunity for equitable recovery. And so that's something I've been very excited about working on. The ward that I represent, as I mentioned, is one of the most diverse in the city. However, it unfortunately is also one home to some of the worst racial disparities in the entire country. And so that comes with a lot of challenges. That's why I was so excited to go to a business opening, is because we have very few businesses in the ward due to historical disinvestment in the community. And so it's actually a gay couple who opened the business. It's Dancing Bear Chocolates, because they're bears. And so very excited to celebrate with them. But you know, the work that we really have to do is really thinking about community wealth. And so that's really where a bulk of my work is thinking about comprehensively, what does it look like to build wealth within the community? I am originally from a small town in Illinois. I have bounced around a little bit. I moved to the San Francisco Bay Area when I turned 18, because I thought that's what all good queers from the Midwest do. Got out there, it was the Great Recession, which was a great time to move to the San Francisco Bay Area. So from there, then I was out there for a while and moved to Chicago. Back closer to my family. And I became a special education teacher and autism specialist on the south side of Chicago in Chicago Public Schools. So I worked with kids for over 10 years before I was elected. Prior also to being elected, I served as the Senior Policy Advisor for Education and Youth Success for the former mayor of Minneapolis, Betsy Hodges. So I was really passionate about the work of local government. No shade to the state legislatures, but favor our local level a little bit, but because I really love being able to be so close to the work in this way. And I'm very fortunate to work with a progressive, mostly progressive city council, so we're able to do some really cool work. Minneapolis and Minnesota are considered Minnesota is considered a flyover state. A lot of folks don't really think of us when they think about progressive areas, but as somebody who's bounced around a little bit, I will say that Minneapolis is the most progressive place that I've lived in the country. And that being said, we also have some of the worst racial disparities at the same time. So living in that duality is a part of being an elected official and trying to do this work well. So I'm very grateful. I am an out and proud Black queer trans man. Identify as trans masculine, also gender nonconforming as well, depending on how I'm feeling that day. So thanks everybody for having me included. I'm very honored to be here and to have my voice as a part of this conversation. I will now pass it over to Delegates, which is a fun title, Delegate Roem.
All right. Well, so Councilman, thank you so kindly. And I just want to first just say to Philippe and Andrea, I'm so proud of both of you. I am so proud of both of you. And Andrea and I, we actually trained together at the 2017 Victory Institute's Candidate Campaign Training Program. That's right, class 2017 represent, 2016, I'm sorry, 2016 represent. And Philippe, I know you were there the year before. So that's great. And what a lot of people don't know, by the way, is that Gerri Cannon, she was elected to the school board in New Hampshire the same night that Philippe, Andrea, and I were all elected. And so 4 of those 8 of out trans people who were elected are on this call right now from 2017. I'm the first one of that group to be reelected, but all 3 of us will be up on the ballot next year between Andrew, Philippe, and me. And obviously, you know, Representatives Bunker and Cannon and Titone are all up again for reelection this year. And I was reelected last year, so you know we're getting it done already, y'all, and it feels really good. And just for all the things y'all are doing in Minneapolis, I'm over the moon happy for both of you. I'm so proud of you because I know you guys are just absolute beast at constituent service, which I love. And I'd be like, for you to tell me like, oh man, I got a gay couple that's doing a business ribbon cutting during quarantine right now. I got to go across the street. Hold on, I'll be right back. I'm just like, yes, that's how government's supposed to work. As soon as your constituents are out there doing something cool, you're like, God. So anyways, my name is Danica Roem. I'm so grateful to represent the people of the 13th district of the Virginia House Delegates, which includes the city of Manassas Park and the Prince William County portions of Haymarket, Gainesville, and my lifelong home of 35.5 years of Manassas. And for Holly, who mentioned my equal rights amendment tattoo, yes, that's real. It's actually a thing because, hey, we got it done. State number 38 this year. So, woo! The things I just kind of want to mention before, you know, I guess I pass the baton myself here, is that what we did in 2017, there wasn't a roadmap, and I wasn't doing it by myself. You just heard that 4 of the 8 of us who were on this call, you know, for the 8 of us who got elected that night who were on this call, we had our individual paths to get to where we got. And one of the things I really try to talk a lot about is that as trans people, we are not a monolith. We have very different perspectives, different worldviews. We come from different areas. And what we each bring to the table is reflective of the regions where we're from, where we grew up, our life experiences, our race, gender, socioeconomic status, the people who we represent. All of that shapes our worldviews. But what we have in common, each of us understands what it's like to have systemic barriers to access that were designed for us to fail, put in front of us. And so that we understand what it means as elected officials to have to overcome obstacles in order for us to succeed. One of the things I always say, though, And I know Mara and Clara, you guys know this from the 2017 campaign, Deanna and Katharina and Maggie and all the rest of my Prince William and Virginia crew. So good to see all y'all. And Emma, even you were there for part of the campaign. You know, I always tell people, don't tell me why I can't succeed. Tell me what barriers are in my way that I need to overcome in order to succeed, and then help me get there. And then one of the things about us as out trans officials is that when we get to the front of the line, we don't turn around and say, how come you're not up here yet? How come you haven't pulled yourself up by the bootstraps and gotten yourself up here? We say, join us, and what can I do to help? That's leadership. That's demonstrating your commitment to inclusivity, just like we're, the very banner of this, Zoom call today. And that's demonstration of being all in this together and actually caring about those other perspectives. Because as a white trans woman from the Mid-Atlantic, I'll never know what it means to live the life of either Andrea or Philippe, but I also don't know what it means to live the life of either Brianna or Lisa or Gerri for the same token. What I do know, though, is the power of listening, of understanding different perspectives, and then bringing those perspectives to the table, because as a local legislator with a national profile, I know that I have this amazing opportunity to be able to elevate other people's voices and to bring other people along with me. As the most high profile person of 2017, I also know I didn't do it alone and that I wasn't the only one out there. And so I tried to make sure that when I'm here, I'm being a, absolute monster constituent service, 28 town halls, my first 28 months in office, and making sure that I'm doing, everything from, my team and I, we've put out 9 newsletters in the last 9 weeks, strictly related to COVID-19, that are about 5,500 words each. We have the most comprehensive, thorough newsletter you're going to find in Virginia about what we're doing. And we got feedback just last night from someone who's just like, this is so great that you all are doing this. I learned so much from what you guys are putting out. And we also know that when we have local issues, we can find things that happen at the national level and find a way to localize them so that if there's a problem, say when I had to take on a fight with the USDA, which we'll talk about later, and then I was able to identify how it affected a 7-year-old girl with cancer in my district, we were able to do something on a nationwide level that helps kids like her all across the country. That's a very, very special part about this job, is that you can see a global problem and you can act locally in your community. And that's what all of us in this call are dedicated to doing every single day, is that when we hear about an issue, we don't just get online and go like, wow, that sucks. We also can do that too, but we will then also then come out and say, here's what we're gonna do about it. Here's what we're gonna do to make change.
All right. Yeah, we're not able to unmute ourselves, so there's a little bit of a delay. So please forgive us for the awkwardness as we're trying to figure that out. Council Vice President, do you want to introduce our next panelist?
Yes, I will go ahead and do that. And our next panelist is, we'll hear from Representative Lisa Bunker. So please give a warm welcome. And Lisa, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, lovely humans. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Brianna, for getting this event together. It's really great to see all 4 of our faces on the same screen. My name is Lisa Bunker. I am one of 4 representatives of the small town of Exeter, New Hampshire. You'll hear maybe something about this from Gerri too. New Hampshire is a really unusual state in that we have a 400-member House of Representatives. This is in a state with only 1.3 million people. It is truly hyper-local politics. It's a lot more like what Andrea and Philippe do, in fact. I'm one of 4 representatives for a small town. And I was first elected in 2018, inspired by Danica's example, in fact. I was horrified by the results of the 2016 election and wanted to do whatever I could, but I self-selected out of running for office because I thought, as an out trans woman, I would never get elected. And Danica showed that that was not true, that it was in fact entirely possible. And then once I figured out how New Hampshire state politics actually worked, I discovered that it was not only possible, but eminently doable. And I did a little fundraising and a lot of door knocking. By the numbers, if you do the division, each of us in the House of Representatives here in New Hampshire represents about 3,000 people. I had 300 conversations, so I talked to 1/10 of my constituency face to face, which I just find fascinating. I'll do a really brief bio background. I had a 30-year career in public broadcasting. I worked at radio stations in Seattle, Washington, and Pensacola, Florida, and 2 different stations in Maine. I figured out my gender and transitioned about 10 years ago. After that, I became an activist. I was involved in the fight to legalize marriage in the state of Maine both times that we tried. The first time that we lost, and the second time that we won before the national victory. About 4 or 5 years ago now, I had what I call my year of miracles. I met and moved to live with the love of my life. We are now married. And I also found success in the field I have been trying to break into since I was a teenager, which is writing for a living. And I now have 2 books out for young readers with a lot of LGBTQ characters in them, and I'm busy trying to sell my 3rd. So that's my day job. I got into politics, I think, as an extension of my my activist work. One of the first things I did when I moved to New Hampshire to be with Dawn was I found out that there were some really nasty anti-trans bills up at the State House, and I went up to testify, and I began to see that the legislators were just regular people like me. That also contributed to my decision to run, seeing that it was possible for someone like me to be involved there. Since getting elected, I was assigned to a very ungendered committee. I'm on Ways and Means, so I've learned more than I ever thought I would know in my life about state revenue, but there's not much gender content to that. It has been my pleasure to support some trans-positive bills, including a couple that originated from Gerri, and I'm sure she'll say something about those. I also found that it was amazingly powerful to be a colleague showing up in committee hearings against some really nasty bills. One of the first things I did in Concord as a legislator was testify against a bill that would have identified any attempt to help a child with gender transition as child abuse, which is a bill that has, I've seen versions of it in other states too. I think it's one of the most sort of toxic and virulent anti-trans legislations that people try. This last year, we had a big fight about which probably you've seen this where you are too, trans athlete bills. So they wanted to really have a very restrictive test for what constituted girlhood for playing in girl sports in high school. So I helped fight against that. And I'm thinking, the New Hampshire state legislature is in limbo right now. We don't really know what's going to happen in the coming months because of the virus. But on my list of possible pieces of legislation to sponsor next year is a trans athlete positive bill, rather than just trying to defeat a negative bill. Let's just actually come up with a best practices sort of proactive policy that we can maybe try to get passed. So I think it's been, being an out trans legislator in Concord has been a matter of fighting bad bills, supporting good bills, but it's also just being visible, because from all the way from the most transphobic and homophobic of the GOP caucus to our staunchest allies, I don't think most of those people knew they knew a trans person until Gerri and I showed up. And I think both for allies and for opponents, it helps them to understand that, you know, aside from this one curious fact, we're regular humans. I hope that visibility is valuable. And it's such a pleasure to sometimes hear from young kids in our state who say, I didn't know that I could do things until you told me. Or there's in a town right next door to me, there's a trans man who's going to be running for state rep, and he asked for coffee, and of course we met and talked. So it's a pleasure to pay forward the inspiration I received from Danica to other people, and especially in these horrible times in national politics. I just think it's wonderful that this caucus next year, year after that, it's going to be 8 people, 12 people, 15 people, and it's just going to keep growing from there. So it's exciting to be in at the beginning of such a beautiful change in the national consciousness.
Thank you. I really appreciate the aspect of bringing affirming bills rather than being on the defense. I think that is something that we're just so used to being in a defensive posture, right? Like they're trying to hurt us. But thinking about it from a space of like, but how do we set the standard and actually create something affirming, I think really is the next level of space for legislating for those of us from our community. Council Vice President Jenkins and I'm not sure if she mentioned this, but we worked together to ban conversion therapy in Minneapolis, and we were the first city in Minnesota to do that. And it's like, so we stop the harm from happening, and then how do we help create space for the healing as well? So like that's the next step, and so I really appreciate you bringing that up. Next, we have State Representative Gerri Cannon. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here, especially with all 4 of us at one time. We've talked individually, but never really had the chance to be in. It's kind of hard to be in the same place at the same time, but at least on the screen at the same time. Yes, I won my first local election as a school board rep in 2017. This past fall, I won my 2nd term on the school board. So I've been running for local jobs and then local and state and local and state. I've run campaigns every year for the past 3 years. Now I'm on my 4th. It's been an interesting ride. I never expected to be here. Was in the computer field for a little over 30 years. I've run my own carpentry business for a few years. I've done consulting. I drove a tractor trailer for 5 years across the country. And now I'm essentially retired. Yes, I'm a young 67 years old. So, and I've got a lot more running to do. So I'm going to keep on doing it. It's been great here in New Hampshire. Part of it is watching the community grow, come out of the shadows. And I've been involved with folks for a little over 20 years, forming a support organization, as well as being involved doing public speaking activities. Been an active member of PFLAG, and essentially being involved with a lot of the LGBT community for a long time, educating not just the straight population, but our LGBT members as well. And it's been quite an education doing that, but it's also quite an education taking that knowledge to Concord, to our state capital, and educating others. And I've been doing that. In 2009, I was a part of our same-sex marriage efforts, as well as the first of our trans rights bills. And that was an experience for me because I was a sole lobbyist, knocking on doors. We have to capture our representatives in the hallways because we don't have offices in Concord. The senators get offices, but we end up with offices in our home. 400 people, that's a lot of space in Concord. So, and so we have our own home offices, and we get paid $200 for the 2 years we're in service. So in New Hampshire, our job is essentially a volunteer job. You've got to want to do this. So kudos to Lisa and to everybody else in the New Hampshire legislature for standing up to run for what they believe in. And for most of us, it's not just for our local communities of being who we are. It's the communities we live in, as well as for the whole state. It's fantastic for me I'm on the Health and Human Services and Elderly Affairs Committee and the subcommittee for mental health issues. It's fascinating because I have no medical background, but on our committee, we have about half of the committee are medical professionals. The other half are people that are upstanding people in the community that got elected, that represent their communities. And it's quite a good discussion when we get involved with legislative efforts, because you're hearing from the professionals as well as John Q. Public. And that's how we do get a lot of the bills through that we work on, is to get the general questions. And some of us who aren't involved, we ask the dumb questions. And that's how I let people know. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to do, ask the questions that everyone feels has already been answered, but it probably needs to be revisited again. And so I'm glad to be in the House. It was a long way to get here. And as we go through with the questions, so the rest of the session, we'll probably hear more of our backgrounds and where we had to go and what we had to overcome to get where we are. So I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Gerri, and thank you to all of our panelists for stepping up and running for office and serving in the capacities that you are. You know, we're gonna go ahead and jump into our questions that have been submitted by the audience. Councilmember Cunningham and I will alternate on the questions. Some will be for all of the participants, all of our panelists. Some will be specific to certain panelists. But I want you all to just make sure we're succinct in our answers so that we can try to get through as many of these questions as we can. And I will start with the first question. I'm sorry?
Sorry, everybody. That was my dog barking in the background.
Oh. Okay. Yeah, our pets want airtime in this whole new virtual world. So
Truly.
So the first question, and everybody can maybe speak to this, and some of you have, but just reiterate, why did you in fact want to run for office?
I see I'm unmuted, so I'll go first. To me, it's a matter of doing what we can, each of us. I think we're seeing this sort of peak right now of a virulent form of the conservative impulse. It terrifies me. It's not just the one person in the White House. It's the people who elected him and the people who continue to believe in what he does in spite of the daily outrages. And I don't think we've seen anything like this since the 1950s and sort of the red baiting and the House of Un-American Affairs Committee. And I guess maybe in the arc of history, this cycle comes around every 50 years or so, and we're at the crisis point. And so after he whose name I do not like to say got elected in 2016, I just thought, I've got to do what I can. And my life had changed and I was freer, I had more time. And so when I finally realized it was possible to run, it was a no-brainer. I had to do it. Someone else?
Great, thank you. Delegate Roem, do you want to tell your story about what inspired your run?
All right, thank you very kindly. So what inspired my run? My mom's commute to work, 40 years, up and down Route 28, and nothing was getting done to fix it between Yorkshire and Centerville. So that's why we're in for office, to go fix Route 28. And by the way, the Route 28 I-66 interchange is under construction right now as I speak, to remove the 4 traffic lights between I-66 and Lawrence Park in the north. Actually, just yesterday, the MBTA Finance Committee was putting forward their plan for the widening of 28 over in Centerville from 4 to 6 lanes. And here in the 13th district, I am going to be unveiling within the next couple weeks the final version of the study that we have which we will then be pursuing funding for through Smart Scale, which is a state funding mechanism for transportation projects, for us to take care of the 2.1 mile stretch of road that happens to be in the district that I represent, where we have more than 70 crashes per year in this one little 2 mile stretch of road. And that's more than 70, sometimes it gets up to 100. And we've had fatality, we've had, severe injuries, we've had, lots of fender benders, but all those accidents can contribute to bad traffic, and so do the stoplights. So we have a lot that we're working on 28 right now, which is great. And one of the things I did with that was, my predecessor had been in office since I was 7 years old. And I ran for office when I was 32, turned 33 during the campaign. And I said, look, Route 28 through this area was just as bad now as it was in 1992. And, I was saying that he had spent more time focused on where I go to the bathroom as a trans person than how his constituents got to work. And so, well, we did something about it and we won. And at the same time, one of the other problems, with that I was addressing when I was running was that in 2017, the entire House Republican caucus, all 66 of their members, voted against Medicaid expansion for 400,000 uninsured Virginians, while all 34 members of the Democratic caucus voted for it. So, well, we changed some seats and we flipped 15 of those seats. We got to within a 51-49 deficit as opposed to 66-34. And the next year, we passed Medicaid expansion for 400,000 Virginians, and we have now enrolled more than 411,000 Virginians, including more than 3,000 of my constituents. And so we are getting the damn thing done right now. And at the same time, my platform in 2017 was traffic, jobs, schools, equality, and healthcare. Well, we got Medicaid expansion. We've now passed the largest transportation funding bill since 1986. And as a member of the Transportation Committee, I get to have a lot of fun dealing with that stuff. I will also very soon be announcing a major appointment that I received to a transportation-related committee. So stay tuned, Virginia. Got some news later. And in terms of the education aspect of it, one of the interesting things about serving in office that I know all of our panelists and moderators can attest to is that there are always going to be people who specialize in these really big deal issues like education, for example, who have been working on them long before you got elected. And that means that in order for you to stand out, you got to find your niche. You got to find something where you can address the big name issues. There's no reason why you can't, be an active participant in them. But if you want to lead from the get-go, you got to find an area where you can specialize. And for me, that was feeding hungry kids. And part of that is, it was one of my constituents wanted me to do that. And I said, okay. And the second part of this is that I have my district, the 13th district here, is wildly diverse. And if you go into the elementary schools, the kids are, Latinx, and the kids are, coming from all over the world to live here, which means that their delegate needs to be unabashedly pro-diversity, unabashedly inclusive, and going into those schools and telling these kids, what can I do to help? And we were seeing in Prince William County more than $300,000 per year of school meal debts stacking up. Well, the concept of school meal debt shouldn't exist in the first place. That shouldn't be a thing. So we got down to work. And in the last 2 years, now, 5 of my pieces of legislation have now passed, including my banner legislation, which will ban alternative meals from being served to students, which basically means that if a kid's got school meal debt, they'll get a cold cheese sandwich while the other kids are feeling lasagna. That's you never, ever, ever take it out on the kid. You never take it out on the kid. So that was another thing I wanted to get done. And here's one of the other funny parts. On my platform that I ran on in 2017, there was an entire section on equality. And then when I want to deal with equality related issues, Danica Roem's not paying enough attention to Route 28, to infrastructure. Oh no! As if multitasking doesn't exist. As if, as legislators, we don't all deal with multiple issues at the same time. We do. You can be laser focused on taking care of specific issues. And then when you get them done, you can then go on to the next one. And guess what? Now that my Route 28 study has already gone through, now that it's getting its final touches right now, it's going on, I can do other things to go along with it. And that's why this year I introduced 3 pieces of pro-LGBTQ equality legislation that we actually passed, including a landmark bill that personally affected me in 2014, which deals with barring discrimination against trans people in healthcare. And that means that this bill does two things in particular. Number one, it says that if you're trans, that the same services that are available to cisgender people are available for trans people. So basically, if you're a trans woman and you need a prostate exam, or if you're a trans guy and you need cervical cancer screening, you can get that done. The other thing that it says is that trans healthcare is medically necessary because, well, no kidding, it is. And all we did was just codify existing practice with this. Because as we see right now, the Trump administration is trying to gut the ACA's, trans care provisions, which means that we have to then lead in the states on this. We have to take we've got to take onus on making sure that our constituents aren't being discriminated against on plans that our states actually regulate in the first place. In Virginia, it's about 22% of plans. So being able to deal with all of those aspects while at the same time feeling like I was not being represented and that my district wasn't being represented the way that it is now, that was important to me. And what we did in 2017, as I'm looking at who's on this call right now, beyond the panelists and the moderators, and I'm seeing my Virginia crew who's here, we did something in 2017 to tell every transgender child in America, and especially right here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, that this is your Commonwealth too. This is your United States too. And you deserve to run this place as much as anyone else. It's your time to be a part of this as much as anyone else. This is your place. You are not excluded. And being able to send that message loud and clear across the country that discrimination is a disqualifier, it will backfire against you, and that if you single out and stigmatize the very people you're elected to serve in the first place, we will unseat you, or at the very least, we will put you in the minority, and we will find a way to block discriminatory bills. And here's the thing, even as we're making great progress, as we're seeing in Colorado and Virginia in terms of LGBTQ equality, we know that in states like Idaho and Tennessee and South Dakota, some states are going back. Well, here's the thing, we'll win there too. We will. We'll get that taken care of too. Don't tell me we won't, because we did it right here, right in the heart of the old Confederacy. The 13th district is home to the first battle of the Civil War. Don't tell me that we can't get it done, because we did it here in the South, and that means we can do it all across the country too.
Thank you for that. That's powerful and quite an inspiration. I think that one of the things that I appreciate is running as a transportation nerd rather than a trans person, right? Like I ran as a policy wonk, not a, it's like, and I'm a trans person, right? Like there are multiple identities, and we're not running simply to represent trans folks, but actually represent our neighbors in our community. Another thing is Danica unseated a longtime incumbent. I actually myself unseated a 20-year city council and president, whose mother had held the seat for 25 years before her. So there was a family dynasty, and I'm the first Black person to hold this position, even though it's a majority minority area. And so, it is very possible for us. I have lots of families. I have lots of moms who come in to my office hours and being like, I think my kid is trans. What can I do to support? And that's one of the most powerful experiences as a council member. I would like to be able to ask another question. So I'll ask this to Representative Titone. Let me pull this up here right quick. Where do you draw your strength to fight the good fight?
All right. So, I always had, well, I mean, I have ADD, so I have a little bit of a problem focusing on things, and I get distracted a lot. So I like to keep busy and doing this job, because there are plenty of things to do, and there are plenty of people that need help. So as long as people keep bringing me for me to help them with, I put it on the pile. And I also want to point out, my staff member, Michelle, is working behind the scenes right now. Of her, so she does a lot of the work that I can't do. So when I'm in a meeting and I'm writing letters and attending stuff and doing all the things that I have to be focused on, a lot of those constituent outreach well, filling in. So it takes a good team of people to do it. But you know, it's the reward of people saying like, "Oh my God, you know, thank you so much for helping me." You know, it's like, and it didn't really take all that much effort to do. What I like about my position the most is just they get something done. You know, they raise the alarm bell to me, and I'm able to go above and fix that problem. So, you know, that's what we're all about. That's what we're here for. This is the role that we should play, and this is the role that I feel that we all need to be, and that every elected official should be. And I'm trying to set the bar really high, because I want anybody who wants to come here after me, and I have term limits. So if I serve my 4 terms in the House, that's it for me. So if after 8 years, I'm done. But I want that bar set real high. And I want to make sure that anybody else who comes in this seat knows that the people in this district demand and expect them, their representative, to do a good job and to actually respond to the constituents and do the work. Because anybody else who comes in the seat who doesn't, we'll find somebody else who will and who would actually do the job. It's hard. This job is as hard as you want it to be, and as hard as you make it. And I make it hard because I'm only here for a certain time, and the only time I have to make a difference is right now. And if I don't do it right now, then I've let this time not go in a good way for me. So I'm trying to make the most of it and do the most that I can while I'm here, while I have this power, while I have this platform, while I have this microphone and the platform to speak on. And that's what drives me to do what I do.
Great. I will turn it over to Council Vice President Jenkins, because I do believe we're running low on time. So I want to make sure that she asks a very important question.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Cunningham. And we are getting very close to our time. This is so amazing. And really, it's interesting because most of you have really kind of answered a lot of the questions that people have posted. And so good on you, good job, panelists. But one question that I wanted to make sure we got out was, and it's from our from the audience, and basically it's asking what are you doing for transgender girls of color? And as we know, or hopefully we know, that so far in 2020, 10 transgender people have been murdered that we know about. And so that question is for any of you who want to take it up. And maybe we should start with Lisa.
One of the things that's unusual about New Hampshire is we're one of the whitest states in the nation. I think we and Maine trade first place in that contest, if you want to call it that. It makes that question a little bit more remote for us, perhaps, than for other folks. I guess I would subsume it into fighting for the rights of trans people generally in the state. I think it's horrible that when we observe the Transgender Day of Remembrance every year, it's almost entirely trans women of color that we're noting the deaths of, and I think that's yet another place, just like the current virus crisis, that really sort of lays bare the deep racial inequalities that still exist in this nation. We are a racist nation, and it takes stressors like that sometimes to just sort of open that up and show it to the world. So just from where I sit and from the power that I have, I think what I can do is fight for all trans people. But I'm tracking and trying to educate myself and learn more all the time about the differences that exist in our society and culture.
Representative Cannon, did you want to take a shot at that question? Can someone unmute Representative Cannon?
You're muted, dear.
There we go. Yeah, just as Lisa said, we're a pretty white state. However, I know in the small city I'm in Somersworth, New Hampshire, in the school system, the teachers have to deal with kids that there's 12 different languages that are spoken. We have one of the largest populations of Indonesian families northeast of New York City. So we have a lot of discrimination of many kinds that we have to be aware of. But even in the state, although we have a very small population of Black transgender people, we do raise the issue of discrimination against anybody is not right. And we've done a really good job of making sure that in all of the statutes that we have, it's at least called out. The next step is making sure that our law enforcement agencies are aware of that, which we've done a pretty good job of. We don't have a whole lot of problems as far as racial incidents with our police departments. That's not to say there aren't any. They do happen, but most of the perpetrators are hauled on the carpet when they do that. So it's a pretty good state. On the other hand, we want to set a good example, as Lisa said, for the rest of the country, is that we are doing things that should be done in our communities and should be done elsewhere. So we like to do things that can be used as examples. And I think we really focus in on that. I know that we're aware of other issues in parts of the US, and we are on top of those issues to make sure we address them. Now, the conversion therapy stuff we dealt with a couple of years ago. This past year, we added non-binary people to driver's licenses. I'm working on birth certificate changes for female to male, male to female, and non-binary people here in New Hampshire. So there's things that we're doing just in general. For the transgender community, we're actually in pretty good shape. So we've done a lot of work, both in the schools and in the general public, to protect people, make sure that they're aware it's not legal to discriminate against the transgender population. But there's still, the biggest thing that we all need to do is education. People just don't know who we are. That's what I started doing back in 2009, it was all education. It wasn't just Democrats or Republicans, it was everyone. And so the more education, the more people that want to get out in public and educate people about who we are, the better. Because most of the challenges, some people are afraid of who we are. So when you see discrimination or situations, it's because people don't understand us. So we've got to educate people more.
I will say that I did go to graduate school in Manchester for 2 years. So, and there are some Black people in the state of New Hampshire.
There are. I agree. Yeah.
Yes. But I think Delegate Roem wanted to speak to this question a little bit, and I do want to make sure that we can get as many of these other questions in as possible. But go ahead.
I'll keep this one to less than a minute, but one of the things that I've done here is making sure that, just as Mara was talking about in the chat, saying their name. For example, when I introduced and passed the Trans Day of Remembrance bill, marking November 20th of every year here in Virginia as Transgender Day of Remembrance, specifically mentioned the name of the Black trans women who've been murdered here in Virginia. from the last few years. And in working with that, I consulted Black trans women to help me write the resolution, because I'm going to have blind spots. And I'm really glad I did, because I would have missed someone's name if I didn't. And when I was, when I had my trans healthcare bill to come up this year, we had Black trans women actually come to testify for these bills. When the president was speaking in Jamestown, this is one of the most difficult decisions I've had to make as a legislator, but I know what I did. I know I did the right thing for me, even if other people may feel free to agree or disagree, and that's fine. Most of the Legislative Black Caucus had decided to boycott the event that the president was speaking at, that was marking the 400th year of both, Virginia's General Assembly being founded, as well as the arrival of enslaved Africans in Virginia. That's unfortunate. That's our reality. And I could have either boycotted the event and gone to an alternative event, or knowing my profile, that national profile that I have as a local legislator, and knowing my goal, one of the things we always talk about in the trans community as white trans women is elevating the voice of trans people of color. We talk about this all the time. I knew that in an event that the President of the United States was at, that there would be a ton of media there, and that if I brought as my special guest a trans woman of color from Richmond, who could then rebut the President of the United States, that I am then taking my platform, I am giving it to someone who has been historically more disenfranchised than even I have been, and getting her and her perspective out to an entire Commonwealth worth of people who need to hear what she has to say. And so that's the choice that I made. And I decided to go and do that. And then when we did, and I had my friend Aurora Higgs standing right next to me and coming out to testify, we were watching later that day on NBC, here we are, here we have this trans woman of color rebutting the president, which was just this remarkable moment where I had to then think about, imagine when I was 14, what I would have given to see that. What it would have mattered to me to have seen that it's not just us as a curiosity on television, but taking leadership. Our trans elected official standing with trans women of color who's an advocate for healthcare in her community, talking about the very issues that we have to push in terms of equality and equity. That's the very opposite of what the President of the United States has done. And being able to do that and to use that platform mattered to me, but it didn't just stop there. When we had, because we're only in session either January and February, or January, February, and March, depending on which year it is, every day in February, we always have, Black History Month speeches that we give on the House floor. I gave my Black History Month speech last year about Black trans people here in Virginia and their plight, and talking about the founder of Nations Foundation, for example, in Richmond, and all the work that she does in terms of HIV advocacy and taking care and homelessness prevention and all the rest of that. And then I actually went to her foundation and sat with these, amazing women at like 11 o'clock at night, listening to concerns that they have, talking to our community. But it wasn't just there. Then when we have a trans healthcare panel, to be able to bring that community present, so that the insurers had to hear about what pumping parties are. They had no idea, right? But this is something that tends to be more unique to the experience of Black trans women. And for her to explain what happens with this in the first place, and to tell these stuffed suits that make 6 or 7 digits a year about what it means to be a Black woman in, a Black trans woman in Richmond, for example, to bring that perspective, we were able to get the health insurers to testify in favor of my healthcare non-discrimination bill this year. Do you know what the hell Jedi mind trick we had to do to get that? But it worked, because it turns out they were willing to listen. And when you use your platform to bring other voices forward, and you use it to project stories that just aren't your own, you aren't just advancing yourself and your cause, you're taking the cause of an entire community, and you're saying, I might not know what your perspective is about, and that means I need to make sure that you are here and that you're represented and that you're present, And the most important thing that I can do as your legislator is listen and elevate what it is that you have to say.
Councilmember Cunningham, you want to take the next question?
Yes. Give me 1 second here to pull it up. All right, next up, I will, let's see. Are we staying until 30? Okay, great. That's what I thought. Okay. What were some of the obstacles that you faced while you were running? Representative Cannon, why don't we hear from you? What were some of the obstacles that you faced?
Well, the big thing for me was I was new to my community. I had only been here about 2 or 3 years when I first ran for school board. And so people didn't even know me in this community. Like, they probably didn't know a whole lot about me in my previous communities because I was so hidden. As in many transgender folks, we are hidden from the general population. So to try and get known is you've got to step out into the open. You've got to share who you are. You're bold enough to put your dirty laundry out there and let them know this is who I am, just like everybody else. And sometimes the door-to-door conversations are the great ones because people get a chance to meet you. So that gets over the hump of one of the big obstacles. The other obstacles are, when someone has opinion about whether you're a transgender person or not. All of my promotional materials didn't say anything about me being a transgender person. I just highlighted the issues, just like Danica was talking about. I was highlighting the issues that were important to the community, what my opinions were on them, even when we ended up with debates and stuff. I focused on the issues and not about my background as a transgender person. I just highlighted who I was as a person and why these issues were important to me and the community. And that's what was really advantageous. It helped overcome the obstacle of being a transgender person and just becoming a person. I had to work on that pretty hard, especially where I'd been so vocal about being trans and being able to get out, is that to shift that gear and say, okay, if I'm going to get elected, I have to work on issues that are important to everybody in the community. I think the other hurdles are personal things, it's family things. It's as I know I wanted to get into public life, I knew that my ex did not want me to go running and being a very public person because she didn't want to be involved with any of that. So even to this point, I still don't mention her name in any of the material I use, and it keeps her out of the way, and it gives me some freedom to be who I am, to do the job I feel needs to be done. And it's not always the best way to do that unless you've got a partner that can stand up and support you. But sometimes you've got to let that go and just get out in front and do it. I'm lucky that my 2 daughters are just incredibly supportive of me. And even my ex now is actually supportive of me. But those are obstacles, you've got to overcome them. A big one, just if you're going to run for office, try and get some public speaking skills. That's the big. There are representatives in our house. They can't. You give them a microphone, they can't speak, or they ramble on. And I said, it's terrible. If you can speak in public, you've got an edge up on any of your competitors.
That's great advice.
That is great advice. How about from Representative Bunker? What were some obstacles that you faced in running for office?
Not many, honestly. Basically, my own self-doubt and introversion. I loved canvassing. I really hit my stride when I started canvassing because that's a time-limited conversation with one other human at a time, which is just my comfort level. I think of everybody here, I've had the easiest time of it, perhaps just in terms of getting elected. Exeter is a solidly blue town, and whoever survives if there's a primary at all, whoever survives the primary is virtually assured of winning the election in November. That's an interesting, I'll just comment on that very briefly. It's very interesting to have a so-called safe seat. Aside from sort of committing a major felony or something, I don't think I could do anything that would prevent me from getting elected again, unlike many other people here who have to fight for every vote. And I was a little diffident, I think, in my first term, but in my second term, I think I'm going to try to see how far I can take that. I'm safe. I can speak up. I can say things that perhaps other people can't say. We've got an absolute cult in New Hampshire about on the other side of the aisle about taxation. They're even running this. They have this phrase that's been said from the well in our state house: taxation is theft. And I'm going to stand up and say taxation is the sacred duty of our government. We're here to raise the money to do the things that by our Constitution we as a state are required to do. It's not theft, it's our sacred duty. So I am in a position to push back against stuff like that without losing my seat. It's a different perspective, but that's where I find myself.
That's great. Representative Titone, any thoughts?
Well, when I started to run for office, it was a impossible seat to win, everybody said. So when I was out there running for office, and people that would normally give me money wouldn't give me any money because, in a horse race, you wouldn't bet on a horse with 3 legs to win the race. It just wouldn't happen. So why would you waste your money? You want to put your money where you're going to win something. So I struggled just getting money in the door. I didn't get any help from the state party because they said, well, oh, good for you. Good for running. Good luck to you. So, I knew we were kind of on our own. So we had to do everything ourselves with as little money as possible. We designed our own lit. I have one of my team members who knocked on over 11,000 doors herself, Emma. She's and Danica knows who she is too. She's a canvassing machine. We knocked on the doors. We did stuff that was free. We did everything that we could do. We did the postcards, handwritten postcards by volunteers. We did everything we could, but just like Gerri, nobody knew who I was either. Years before I came out, I was trying to become an FBI special agent. I didn't have a social media profile because FBI special agents don't have that. You can't be a public person if you're going to have that job. So leading up to that, I was invisible. I was a closeted trans person anyway. And then when I was out, I wasn't really out. It took me a long time to be out, and nobody knew me in the community. And unlike, the New Hampshire races, I have 85,000 constituents in my district. So, 75% of them vote. So we had to knock on every single likely voter that would have voted for me. And I had nearly 25,000 votes for me in my election. So we knocked on the door. We didn't reach them. We went again. And, that was really the toughest part was, everything that we could have gotten in our way pretty much did. And we didn't use those obstacles as things to get in our way. We just used them as stepping stones to reach a higher pinnacle, and just said, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And we're just going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And I didn't even win on election day. I won on what was it, Thursday or something after the election, because on election day I was losing by over 200 votes because we vote all by mail, a lot like Minnesota does. That's why we have the highest turnouts, Colorado and Minnesota. I hope we beat you guys this time. We're hoping. I have our little competition with y'all. But we have to win every single vote that we can here. And that's what makes it so tough to win a race when you're down 14% in the previous election by the Republican. and nobody expects you to win. You know, it was just one thing after another, just stacking it up. But I said, whatever, we got this, we'll do it, and we did. Before we go any further, though, I think that since we're running low on time, that we should just let everybody who's in the meeting just to let them in on the video. And then as long as we don't all talk on each other and we can kind of raise your hand to talk, we can kind of ask questions directly from people. Is that all right with everybody?
Sounds good to me.
Sounds good.
All right. Well,
I would say, Representative Titone, that Minnesota, we're not all mail-in ballots, but hopefully everybody in the country will be mailing in ballots this November, and we get the turnout up, and we get that idiot out of the White House. Just my plug. Much as I hate to say it, we gotta support the Democratic nominee. We must do that. And hopefully everybody feels the same way. Welcome, everybody. It's so great to see your faces.
There's people out there.
So questions? Hey, Emma. How you doing, girl? Long time no see.
Oh yeah, we have selective unmuting. So
Oh, wow.
well, it's good to see you. We did have a question in the chat box that I wanted to circle back to from folks who have jumped on. So the question from one of the attendees is, when you are outdoor knocking on doors in your district, how frequently do you get negative reactions to your transness? How do you handle them?
Hey, so since I've done the 2 campaigns now, I'll take the first stab at it. It doesn't happen often, but that's not to say it doesn't happen. So I just want to emphasize that when you're trans and you're knocking on doors, you know that is something that is likely to come up at some point, but don't expect it to be your day-to-day. You don't have to knock on a door and say, hey, I'm trans, but I'm really here to fix your road. I'm trans, but I'm going to talk to you about something else. It's just go be yourself at the door. Just be, polite, whatever. Ask them what's on their mind. If a trans issue comes up, if they ask you about it, go address it. It doesn't mean that it has to be the lead of every time that you talk. Hi, my name's Danica. I'm trans and I'm running for office. No, it's just, hey, I'm Danica. I'm running for the House Delegates. How you doing? Nice to meet you. My top priority is fixing around 28, but I want to hear from you. What issues are important to you? I had an incident last year that I thought was actually pretty indicative about how things are changing, really. I was knocking on a persuasion door. So I knew that the people I was there for were not strong Democrats at all. They were there for me to, get on my team, right? And they were both highly likely to vote. And so it was a conversation I needed to have. Well, I get to the door and this man answers and he's talking with me outside. We're talking about Route 28. We're talking about road stuff. And then this woman comes over and she's just like, oh, he doesn't really have time for this right now. He's like, no, hey, it's our delegate. She's just asking me these questions. No, we're Republicans. We're not going to talk. And he's like, hey, we're good. And then, look, I just want to talk to her. That's what he says. And she goes, that's not a her. And she slams the door like this. And he's just like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And we just connected it and we just talked. And I said, hey, you know what? Those things happen. I'm still here. Let's talk. I'm not going to say that's okay. I'm just saying it does happen. I'm acknowledging that's a thing that happens. And him and I, we just talk back and forth. And by the time we get to the end of the conversation, I said, so do you think I can earn your vote this November? And he goes, absolutely. Shakes my hand. And then I get a text message later from him. And he tells me, I'm so sorry for what my wife had to say to you. I see your courage. I see you being out there. And I see you focusing on the issues that are important to someone like me. You've earned my vote. you've got, and that's in the woods. I mean, this is like way the hell, this is like New Hampshire stuff, okay? This is out in the woods part of my district. And if I can do that there and still find a way to win a vote from the House, I'm not going to change every person with one conversation. I'm not going to be that person who's going to then go and condemn that constituent online and you're trying to make a thing out of it. But what all of us share in common as trans people is that when we go and knock on someone's door and they know who we are often the first out trans person that person knows they have met and knows they have talked to. That doesn't mean they haven't talked to a trans person before, but we're the first ones that they know about. And so you do have that part of the conversation that you have to get by, that little bit of bigotry here and there. But you know, another great example of this, I was knocking on doors in one of my other, I have 3 tough precincts. One of my second toughest precinct that I was knocking doors in last year, guy looks at me and is like, oh, right, you're the guy who wants to, you're the guy who calls himself a girl, right? I was like, well, no, actually, my name's Danica, and I'm she, I'm a woman, and he just goes, and he closes his door. I just felt like hell, you're just like, damn it, just, what happens, it doesn't happen often, but when it does, it kind of is a little bit of a gut punch. Well, I went down the street and I got 3 votes out of the next door I knocked. 3 votes out of one house. And I'm sitting there just being like, you know what? I'm not going to let that person drag me down. I'm not going to let that person ruin my damn day. I'm out here to get votes. And I wasn't there to talk to him anyway. I was there to talk to his wife who wasn't home. So you know what? Screw that. If they're going to come after me, they're going to say something bigoted, whatever, I'm going to go find a door where I'm welcomed at that door. And I promise you, there are so many more doors where you're welcome than when you're not. And I know that because 12,077 people voted for me in 2017 and 12,066 of them came back to vote for me in 2019. Thus, people are okay with a trans person at their door and are okay voting for a trans person to represent them when we're holding 99.9% of our voter base in the first place. So that's your bottom line. If it happens, you just deal with it and you move on to the next one, because God knows in this line of work, we know that every door could be our last, but we refuse to give into nihilism and we refuse to let fear govern us, because as trans people, we all know what it means to live in fear. And when we're out on doors, we're not living in fear, we're living with hope, and we are delivering hope to every single one of those doors where we go and we listen to those people and then we act on the very things that they asked us to take care of in the first place.
Wow. Well, everybody, we are at 1 minute. And so I just want to thank everybody for coming out today and being a part of this really brilliant first U.S. Trans Caucus. The intent and the purpose is to raise awareness around transgender issues, and also to raise awareness around these campaigns. So please support these candidates, including myself. We need financial support to be able to do this, as well as volunteers, and just friendly Facebook messages or social media, letters, all of those things help. They all contribute to us being confident, knowing that, there's a community out there that has our back. I want to give each of our panelists and my co-facilitator 30 seconds to wrap up what it is that they want to say, and we'll start with Councilmember Cunningham, and then just go right down the line. The New Hampshire representatives, Brianna and Danica.
Well, I'll be snappy. Thank you all so much for having me here as a facilitator or moderator of this conversation. As the first out transmasculine person of color in office, I feel really grateful to be recognized and a part of these important conversations. I historically what I've experienced is being erased. So I feel like it means a lot to be a part of the conversation. So thank you for the invitation. This has been really great. And I think that one of the things I want to just sign off with is kids, all our trans and gender nonconforming kids, this can be you someday. You can be in these roles. You should be in these roles. You are important, you matter, and we need you and your leadership to help make this world a better place. So don't ever feel like it's not possible, because we're showing you right now that it is. All right, with that, I will pass it on to our next. I'll pass it over to Brianna.
Thank you, Philippe. Thank you for being here, and thank you for Andrea also for being here. You know, when I kind of came up with this concept of getting us all together for this call, you know, I said we need some moderators, and we need some moderators that don't look like us. We need some moderators that look different than us. And you know, Andrea and Philippe, you know, it's important to give you all the microphone. And let you tell your stories, because a lot of people don't know who you are, and people need to know who you are, because that helps people, and it gives people inspiration to get out there and do things, because you're role models for them, just like we all are here. I also wanted to thank Isabel and Emma, Lindsay Severns, who's running back to the screen, for helping put things together with logistics for this event. And if everybody is interested in doing this again, we can do this again another time. I think that this, you know, is a good place to start. And I think there's a lot more conversation to be had. I mean, the time goes by so fast with these things. But you know, I want to keep doing this job as a legislator. I get a lot of people saying thank you all the time for being here, and for what I do, and for being an inspiration to them, and that just, you know, makes me work extra hard, and to do this work every day with my heart in it 100%. And that's what matters. And if I inspire another person to run, just like Danica inspired me to run, you know, before we know it, you know, there's going to be just dozens of us running in all different places, and showing that representation really matters. So that's why I think these events are really important to have, and to give people access to us, because that's what helps. I mean, my friend Eve is on the call right here. Wave hi, Eve. I inspired Eve to come out, and that's the kind of thing that we need to do more of, is just give people that freedom and the courage, right back at you, to do this, to come out and to be themselves, and having these role models as we are, is so important. So thank you again. Really appreciate every one of you for being on the panel, and for being here in the room to listen to us. So thank you so much.
Great. Representative Cannon? 30 seconds.
30 seconds. The biggest thing I want to share with folks that I really appreciate, we get the opportunity to speak here, but if people are thinking about office or just being involved, even canvassing or whatever, is to be proud in who you are, to share that about yourself with other people, that you are proud, that it has taken you a lot to get to where you are today, and that you want to take your pride as well as your strength to represent your community, and to let people know that you're not going to be hindered by people that want to call you a transgender person or part of the LGBT community. You're a resident of the community, and you're interested in your community, and let people know that's your strength, and that's why you want to represent them. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Representative, Delegate Roem?
Thank you so kindly. My message to every trans person who's watching this, trans and gender nonconforming, non-binary folks across the country, is that you can succeed because of who you are, not despite it, and not for what discriminatory politicians tell you you're supposed to be. You go be you better than anyone else ever could, because you're the only person who ever can. And you know a funny thing? It turns out that when you're motivated and you're well trained, and by the way, go through the Victory Institute's LGBTQ training program, go through Emerge, America, go get trained before you run for office. Turns out that we're pretty damn electable. 3 of us flipped Republican seats, and 3 of y'all also, held Democratic seats, and Philippe also flipped a seat. And, when you really think about this stuff, what are we doing that's remarkably special? That we're being ourselves and we're doing what everyone else already does, or what has already been available for cis people for 400 years in this country, which is run for office. And it took 399 years here in Virginia for straight white men to not have a supermajority in the Virginia House of Delegates. 399 years. 4 centuries of one demographic group having a supermajority. Brianna is fortunate to serve with the majority of women. And now you have, over Nevada, you've got that as well. But we've got a lot more work to do. And we've got a lot more work to do to make sure that our diversity is actually reflected nationwide, which means that we need you running for office. We need you giving enough of a damn to want to do it in the first place, and making yourself vulnerable enough to be visible in the first place, because every single one of us had someone else who inspired us to come out and to be ourselves. And we hope we can do the same for you all out there, because this is the only way that you can be. And just to, I guess the last thing I'll say is to paraphrase a quote from John Kennedy that he gave at American University in 1963. We all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's futures, and we are all mortal. Go be yourself. Go be you. Go run. Go win. Go serve. And by the way, go pass more bills than your predecessor did, because that's what I did this year. Take care.
Representative Bunker, do you want to, I think that's everybody. You want to close us out?
Sure. I would like to say it's dark times right now. There's a lot of fear and anger in our country. People who are sort of heartless and corrupt are in positions of power, and it may not be entirely rational, and I certainly do have my dark days, as I'm sure everybody does, but I still have hope. I have a ton of hope for the future, and I am proud to be part of fighting for a better future for everybody in this country.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Can we also unmute? There we go. Well, thank you, everybody, for being a part of this and for joining such a powerful, monumental event, bringing us all together in this way. Again, thank you. And I will have Council Vice President Andrea Jenkins give us the last word out.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Cunningham. Thank you, Representative Titone, for putting this together. Thanks to all of the panelists for your brilliant insights and for your courage to stand up and be a part of this democracy and fight for our communities. It's going to be a really difficult time in most states and cities for the foreseeable future. I know that state legislatures are losing revenues like there's a hole in the bucket, because literally there is a hole in the bucket right now. But I know that myself and my colleagues are committed to making sure that we are addressing the most vulnerable people in our communities and creating opportunities for those people to succeed. And I really want us to think about, and I think Representative Bunker hit on it, is that whenever we have these crises, there are always opportunities. And so we need to look for the opportunities and make sure that we are capitalizing on them. And right now, the biggest opportunity we have in front of us is to elect a Democratic president. So let's make that happen. Till we meet again, and hopefully we can meet again in person soon. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you so much.